is the site going to remain functional? But
Mm.
so far so good, but kind of everybody's holding their breath.
What is going on at Twitter at the moment? It's reported this morning up to 1,200 employees have quit after the owner Elon Musk demanded staff sign up for long hours at high intensity or indeed leave. Well, let's speak to the Times US West Coast correspondent Danny Fortson, who's based in San Francisco. Morning, Danny.
Very good morning. How are you?
Good, thank you. So, I mean, 1,200 staff, lay this into some kind of context for us. Percentage wise, how many people is that? And how is that affecting just the running of Twitter right now?
It's quite extraordinary. So if you go back 3 weeks, this company employed between staff and contractors 13,000 people. And after this latest wave of resignations, following a couple of big rounds of redundancies, they're down to about 2,500. So that gives you a sense. They're down about 80% in about 3 weeks. So you do kind of wonder, is the site going to remain functional? But so far so good, but kind of everybody's holding their breath.
I mean, I was reading yesterday that there's a real lack of engineers as well.
Yeah, I mean, entire teams simply left. And quite funnily, including the guy who controls badge access for the company. And apparently, Elon Musk himself couldn't get back into the building, so had to ask the person he just fired to come back to let them in the building.
Wow. Wow. God, I mean, you kind of wonder if this is all a grand plan. You know, you look at Musk yesterday tweeting this picture of a gravestone with a Twitter emblem on it. Is this part of a grand plan? I mean, I know we can't read his mind, but what are your thoughts? Is he out of his depth? Is it a grand plan? What's the thinking?
So I think what's really interesting is that it is absolute utter chaos right now. But you have a lot of tech executives who are taking a very close look at what he is doing because potentially they're saying, well, look, if he can get rid of 80% of staff and it can still work and the doors remain open, so to speak, and there's no kind of big collapse, then maybe we should do that too. And so you have a lot of companies like Meta, Snap, Amazon, et cetera, who have started these big waves of layoffs, but they're, 10, 20%. So it's kind of this $44 billion experiment in ultra lean operation. I mean, it's a high wire act, but we'll see how it goes.
I mean, it's interesting that people saying it still works. I mean, do we know? I mean, okay, tomorrow World Cup starts. There's lots of controversy, obviously, around Qatar having it. You know, I can just imagine that there's going to be videos being posted of people claiming that maybe they've been assaulted by police or something like that. I mean, if that's not verified and it's going up, I mean, this is the worry, isn't it? That things could get on there that simply aren't true because they're not being checked because they haven't got the staff.
Well, exactly right. And that's what we're about to see. That's why I say it's kind of an experiment that we're all living through. But if you think about it, there's about 500 million tweets per day that they have kind of filter, make sure the worst stuff does not get through. And if all of a sudden you have 80% less staff, you have to have some very, very, very good software, AI tools, et cetera. And now that is all going to be absolutely put to the test, as you say, with the World Cup starting and which is for them one of the very big events of the year that really drives a lot of traffic.
Lots of people discussing Twitter's demise on Twitter, which always seems a little bit bizarre.
It's kind of like it's one of the favorite sports on Twitter is to talk about Twitter. But yeah, it's people are very concerned because there is this idea that is this public square, and you've had the world's richest man swoop in, buy it. It is now his plaything, and he appears totally erratic. And a lot of this has been so dramatic and so quick that you kind of wonder, is there a plan here? But the other side is this is a person who is sending rockets into space and has built the world's best-selling electric car from scratch. He has some priors here, so there is some faith that there is a method to this madness. But of course, nobody knows, and running a social network is very, very different from building a car.
Could it collapse realistically?
Absolutely. I would not be at all surprised if we wake up one day and Twitter is dark, at least for a while. I don't think it goes away because I think these companies, these social networks are much more robust than perhaps we realize. And the other thing to keep in mind is that, especially during the pandemic, tech companies, Twitter, Facebook, etc., they went on a hiring binge. And so and everybody agreed that it was pretty bloated. No one thought he would cut 80% of staff and contractors. That's what he's done. But there is a sense that they were very, very flabby and kind of drifting and have been for years. So we'll see, we'll see where it goes.
It's interesting talking to journalists. Many journalists really worry if Twitter goes because it's such an important tool for journalists. We can access information, we can find guests, we can get a sense of what is going on, often from parts of the world where there isn't free reporting. If you think about Iran and places like that, a lot of information comes out. It is a really important source for journalists. I just wonder for other people, for people outside of kind of the media bubble, would it matter if Twitter went that much?
No. This is a short. As journalists, it is very, as you say, it's super important. And for certain celebrities, it is super important. And for some people's businesses and kind of creating followings, it's very important. But if you think about the total users, 240 million in a world of 8 billion. And if you think about Facebook has 3 billion users. And even Snapchat has twice as many users as Twitter. So it has outsized influence because that's where the politicians are and that's where the journalists are. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not that important.
Let me just ask you, Danny, before you go, one of the big stories which have come out of the US overnight is the 11-year prison sentence for Elizabeth Holmes, the Theranos founder. Just remind us who she is and why she's been jailed.
Yes, she was this star for a while. This company was supposedly worth $9 billion. They raised money from some of the most sophisticated investors around the world, and her idea was to create this blood testing device that from a single finger prick you could do something like 50 or 100 tests for various different diseases, ailments, etc. And it turned out to be a total fraud. She pushed it out into the market anyway. It all came crashing down. It was the subject of a best-selling book, a television series, and she was this person who tried to kind of make herself an image of Steve Jobs, and she ended up being a total fraud. And this is the coda to that whole story years later, is that she's finally been sentenced to 11 years, which is significant. But for Silicon Valley, has long been a black eye of just like, how can you let this fraud, how can you let this fraudulent person raise so much money and fool so many people for so long, especially when we're talking about a medical device that affects people's lives and health.
Danny, really good to speak to you as ever. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That is Danny Fortson, the Times US West Coast correspondent, staying up very late for us to speak to us live from San Francisco. We're lucky in here. We can see Danny's live video stream. Very cute cat in the background. I don't know if you noticed, just wandering around. Very, very nice ginger and white cat.